moving over to our Seattle Kraken here. Over the past week, played 4 teams, started their road trip, starting off with that home loss to the Nashville Predators, 2-4. Tough game. I mean, Nashville's a good team. It's funny enough, I say that Nashville was the team that the Kraken earned their first win over in franchise history down in Nashville. Losing that game 2-4, though. Player of the game, forward Marcus Johansson with 2 assists, 2 points, a power play point, 1 shot on target. You go from there, start your road trip in Pittsburgh, playing a Pittsburgh. I mean, at least when I think of Pittsburgh and hockey, it's just they've been a good organization for several years, right? At least if you think about hockey, Pittsburgh's one of the teams that comes to mind.
Oh, yeah.
And they've just it's I don't know who do I compare them to. It kind of reminds me of not necessarily like a New England, but kind of like a Green Bay. They're always going to be competing.
Yeah.
Whether Aaron is there next year or not, But I mean, if you look at it like for a long time, they're always going to be competitive, right? And that's been Pittsburgh, and Seattle goes into Pittsburgh and wins that game 2-1 in overtime. All of the goals came after the midway point of the third period, which is insane to think. You've got a really tight game for the longest time, and you play a really good defensive game against Pittsburgh, who's got a lot of talent. Sidney Crosby's on that roster, Brad Marchand. I might be messing up Boston. It's tough because Boston and Pittsburgh have the same exact color scheme.
Yeah.
But you go and play a team like Pittsburgh who's consistently good and consistently does things, to where they're going to be successful, and you win that game on the road too. So I had 2 players of the game there, defenseman Adam Larson getting the game-winning goal in overtime, and goalkeeper Philip Grubauer. Grubauer had a great game for a good stretch of games here, has been really on a tear. And is kind of settled in and looked like the Grubauer that we were expecting when Seattle signed him to a 6-year deal and free agency, coming off of being a finalist for the best goaltender in the league award last season. Looking back here to those last 4 games. One of those was postponed.
Not 4.
Yes. The game on the 29th at the New York Islanders USB Arena, one of the newer arenas in the league with us, was postponed over weather concerns. The New York governor declared a weather-related state of emergency, that game being postponed to the 2nd. I know that, New York's an interesting place because you got the boroughs and everything, but it's interesting to me that game was canceled and the game at MSG was not canceled. I know that during the game they showed like a view of the streets, and they were, because it's Manhattan, right? The streets are going to have to be a little bit better than maybe Long Island. But it was interesting to, this game against New York is canceled. Oh, this other New York game the next day, though, it's still good to go.
The Knicks are fine.
So that next game, January 30th against the New York Rangers, a 2-3 loss. Unfortunately, Seattle tied that game up with about a minute to go in the third period, and then Keandre Miller would come and score the game-winning goal for the Rangers with 30 seconds left in the period. Player of the game, Jared McCann, 1 goal, 1 assist, 2 points, and 2 shots on goal. Makes it his 3rd consecutive game with the goal. In that game against New York, Seattle put up 42 shots on the best goalkeeper in the league, Igor Shesterkin. Couldn't get the puck past him more than twice. I mean, 42, that's the most they've shot all season.
Yeah, that was a loss later in that game, right? Yeah.
Yeah, because that was
seconds left, I believe. They won the game. Yeah.
So tough situation there to tie that game up. Similar to the Pittsburgh game where you're playing a tough game against a good team. You're holding on for the longest time. You tie it up. You think you're heading to overtime, getting a point at least. Then it all change. But hey, again, as I've said, weeks before when this team was on losing streaks, and even before Bel was here, it's like, this is an expansion team. They're working on things. It's their first year. You're not going to see that immediate success. Vegas has been an outlier. I think everybody has finally come to understand that. I know earlier in the season, it was like, oh, why? Vegas did it. It's like, no, it's a different situation. The teams are much more acclimated to the expansion draft format now.
We're all enjoying the inaugural season, right?
That's how I've looked at it, right? Because you've got this team, probably see some turnover next year. I wouldn't doubt it. But at least not this season, right? Yeah. You want to see who's, hey, we've seen good things, or hey, maybe we've made the wrong decision with the draft here or signing, And Seattle has a lot of cap space to play with next offseason. So that's something that will come into play. And your number 2 overall pick, who is playing for Team USA in the Olympics, will join the team next season, more than likely. So, things to look forward to. But overall, over the last few weeks, I can't complain. I mean, they've played good games. They've beat tough teams, and your goaltender has looked good. So can't complain. Looking into team news, on the 24th of January, the Kraken recalled defenseman Cale Fleury, yes, brother of Hayden Fleury, to the taxi squad from the Charlotte Checkers and reassigned, goaltender Antoine Bibeau to Charlotte. On the 27th, Bibeau was reassigned to the taxi squad. And then on the 30th, the day of the Rangers game, Calle Jarnkrok was ruled out of the game due to an upper body injury. Did go through warm-ups, but was ruled out of the game. And then in the game, forward Carson Kuhlman was ruled out with a upper body injury as well. No current up-to-date status on that. It's funny with hockey injuries because it's either an upper body injury or a lower body injury.
So vague.
And no in between, right? Because other leagues, it's like, sprained ankle maybe,
Yeah.
knee contusion, broken hand, like with broken hand. Jaden Schwartz, who should be back in a few weeks, his injury was upper body injury for the longest time, and then we find out he broke his hand. It's
Which is still technically upper body, I guess.
Oh, yes, but it's funny how that works, Looking ahead here for Seattle, they sit now at a 14-win, 26-loss, 4 overtime loss record, equaling 32 points. The division standing is still 8th. I think it might be tough for us to crawl out of that spot for a bit at least. Their next few games are the first at the Boston Bruins, another tough team to play against, especially on the road, starting at 4 o'clock Pacific time, and then that rescheduled game February 2nd at the New York Islanders with the 4 o'clock Pacific time start. Heading over to our OL Reign